Welcome to HFY Beyond Terra, where humanity doesn't just survive, it becomes the galaxy's biggest surprise. Subscribe, and let's go beyond Terra.
The first thing the mourners asked for was quiet. Not a ceasefire, not amnesty, not resources or reparations. Just quiet and end to the broadcasts, the sirens, the public feeds that made grief into spectacle. The request arrived in the old way, encrypted and humble, as if humility could survive the vacuum between stars. To the assembly of human systems, we request a corridor of silence. 4.2 million kilometers wide, 1 hour long, near the wreck of the vessel you call HARBORLIGHT. We will approach unarmed. We will transmit no images. We will speak only one name. The truce keepers of Ariath in the chamber above Earth's equator, where diplomats now met beneath a ceiling that simulated whatever sky made them feel powerful. The name Ariath returned like a taste you could not rinse away. The Ariathi were not conquering giants nor luminous mystics. They were administrators of endings, a civilization that treated conflict like a leak to be sealed. They had arrived 2 decades ago after the collapse rush and the first wave of human jump gates, bearing treaties thicker than oxygen. They were ancient, yes, but the dread came from something else, their calm. Humans had thrown everything at them once. When the Ariathi ships drifted into Sol like gray stones in a river, the panicked voices on the feeds called them invaders. The Admiralty called them targets. The first volley of rail slugs punched into the lead ship and did nothing visible at all. No explosion, no flaring shields, just the same patient drift, the same quiet curvature of course. Then the Ariathi replied. They transmitted a single equation and the lunar defense net forgot how to be a weapon. Drone swarms lost their targeting. The power stations refused to feed munitions factories. 1,000 systems developed sudden benign errors, as if the universe itself had yawned and misaligned the screws. After that, humans stopped shooting. And then came HARBORLIGHT, an incident that in the year it happened was written as an accident, then as sabotage, then as a necessary misunderstanding, depending on which faction needed votes. HARBORLIGHT had been a humanitarian vessel, carrying evacuees from a contested belt colony. It had also carried an Ariathi envoy, a young one by their standards, Saren of Second Dawn, assigned to observe human mediation tactics. On the public manifest, they were listed as a liaison, a passenger like any other. HARBORLIGHT never reached the gate. A human patrol cutter, jittery after weeks of skirmishes with pirates and splinter militias, identified a non-standard energy signature aboard. A warning was issued. The evac ship, overloaded and terrified, burned hard. The cutter fired a disabling shot, disabling in theory. The beam lanced through the evac ship's spine and kissed a fuel reservoir. For one breath of time, the ship lit up like a funeral star. When the debris cooled and the recordings leaked, Saren of Second Dawn's name was spoken in 100 languages, always in the same tone, an apology that expected punishment. But punishment never came. Instead, the Ariath sent their request for quiet. In the assembly, arguments blossomed immediately. It's a trap. It's a trial. It's a way to shame us. It's a way to measure us. You don't measure a civilization, a tired ambassador from the Jovian rings muttered. You measure your own fear of them. The secretary of Accord, Mara Vance, listened without moving. Her face was all bone and patience now, the kind you earned by surviving too many negotiations where nobody wanted peace until they needed it. She had met Ariathi once in a neutral station above a dead planet. She remembered their suits, simple, matte, with no insignia except a braided cord at the wrist. She remembered their eyes behind the visor, not eyes as humans understood, but a shifting pattern like smoke caught in glass. She also remembered the way they spoke, not as if they were above humanity, but as if they were watching a child learn the rules of fire. We grant the corridor, Mara said. The assembly erupted. You can't, we can, she said and raised her hand for silence. We did something unforgivable, and whether it was accident or negligence or terror doesn't matter. They've asked for quiet. Granted, if we refuse, we admit we can't even respect grief. A general leaned forward. And if they do something inside the corridor, then they do it, Mara said softly, and we'll have earned it. That was the first of the 3 silences that changed the galaxy. The corridor of silence was carved out near the drift of Harborlight's remains, where shards of alloy still tumbled in lazy orbits. Outside the corridor, human ships formed a ring at the required distance. Their weapons were online, their comms muted, their crews restless. Inside the corridor, the stars seemed colder. Mara Vance traveled aboard a small diplomatic skiff stripped of armor and bristling sensors alike. She went alone because the Ariathe had specified a single human presence, one witness unbroadcast. I'm not sure why they picked you, her aide had said. Mara had shrugged. They didn't pick me, I volunteered. Everyone else was too busy imagining the worst. When her skiff crossed into the corridor, the ship's HUD went black. Not malfunction, not jammed, just gone, as if the universe had decided the interface was childish. For the first time in years, Mara saw space with her own eyes through a plain window. No labels, no threat icons, no curated colors. A small Ariathe craft approached. It was not sleek. It was not menacing. It looked like a pebble carved by water, smooth and patient. A beam of soft light touched Mara's skiff, not a tractor, not a weapon, more like an invitation. Her ship drifted closer until both vessels hung side by side. A hatch opened in the Ariathe craft, spilling darkness. Mara swallowed, keyed her microphone, and remembered the rules. No transmissions, no images, speak only one name. She opened the airlock and stepped into her suit. The corridor's quiet was so complete it felt thick. The Ariathe emerged, 3 figures, identical in their simple gray suits. At their wrists, braided cords, each a different pattern, mourning marks. They did not raise hands, did not bow. They simply placed one gloved palm on the hull of their ship as if feeling its temperature. Then together they spoke through a narrow band channel that went directly to Mara's suit. Saren of Second Dawn. The name drifted like a bell struck underwater. Mara's throat tightened. In her mind, she saw the evac ship's flame, the helpless spin, the faces that had screamed without sound. I'm sorry, she tried to say. Her calm remained silent. The corridor held her words like it held everything else, with refusal. The Ariathe did not look at her as she failed to speak. They turned toward the debris field, the scattered bones of Harborlight, and began to move. They did not collect fragments like scavengers. They did not carry tools. Instead, they drifted among the wreckage and touched it gently, one piece at a time. When their gloves met metal, faint lines of light crawled across the surface like frost in reverse. The shards slowed. Their chaotic spins softened into a shared rhythm. Mara watched, a cold bloom rising in her chest. It was a funerary act. They were gathering the dead into coherence. A memory tugged at her, an old earth tradition of washing a body before burial, of preparing it to be seen by those who loved it. Here, the body was a cloud of ruin, and the washing was physics. As the Ariathe moved, something else happened. The debris began to hum, not audible sound, but a vibration that Mara felt in her suit bones. A pattern, a song written in motion. The shards aligned not into a weapon, not into a ship, but into a spiral, an immense, slow-turning helix that caught starlight and returned it in broken, tender flashes. The 3 mourners reached the center of the spiral and stopped. One of them, chord pattern darkest, turned toward Mara. Their visor shifted, smoke glass rearranging itself. The narrow band channel opened. Witness, the voice said. It was not gendered, it was not harsh. You have been silent, this is acceptable. Mara's mouth went dry. She could not speak even if the corridor allowed it. We have come, the Ariathe continued, to return our child to the great current. You call this one envoy, we call this one child. All who go to learn among strangers are children. Mara felt something break loose inside her, an old, small arrogance cracking like ice. The Ariathe drifted closer until they were a few meters away. "You fear what we might do," the voice said. "You fear consequence." Mara's hands trembled. "But consequence is not the purpose of grief." The Ariathe extended a hand toward the spiral of debris. A pulse moved through it, gentle, patient, and the entire helix tightened as if inhaling. Then the shards began to fall inward, not colliding, not shredding, but folding into one another with a precision that made Mara's eyes sting. Metal became thread, thread became cord, cord became a single braided line. At the end of the braid hung a small object, a simple ring no larger than a human palm fashioned from Harborlight's hull. The Ariathe held it between two fingers. "This is the last circle," the voice said, "a closure." They drifted toward Mara and placed the ring into her gloved hands. It was warm, warm in vacuum was impossible, and yet the warmth was there, seeping through suit layers like a memory of sunlight. "Carry it," the Ariathe said, "not as penance, as practice." The channel closed. The three mourners returned to their craft, their hatch sealed. Their ship began to drift away. Mara clutched the ring, stunned by its weight. Outside the corridor, human ships waited with weapons poised. Inside, the first silence ended. Her HUD flickered back to life. And on every human ship in the ring, every screen, without any broadcast permission, without any hacking trace, displayed a single line of text. "Grief is a language, learn it." Then the Ariathe craft vanished, not by jumpgate flare, but by simply not being there anymore, like a thought released. The corridor remained. The spiral of debris did not. Only Mara and the ring and the quiet after. The second silence began a week later in the most human way possible, with arguing. The Assembly demanded to study the ring. The Admiralty demanded to lock it away. The media demanded to monetize it. The cults demanded to worship it. The families of the evacuees demanded answers that could not be made whole. Mara refused them all. She took the ring to the only place she thought it could be safe. An orphan jumpgate array above the Dead Planet series outer, where the old mining traffic had stopped and the stations had been gutted for parts. She brought no entourage, no cameras, just herself and a small team of engineers who still believed engineering could be an act of care. They anchored the ring in the array's central frame. "What is it?" one engineer whispered, as if loud curiosity might break it. "A closure," Mara said. "And maybe an invitation." They spent days trying to scan it. The instruments returned nonsense. The ring was composed of common alloys and uncommon alignments. Its mass changed when no forces acted on it. Its temperature drifted toward the hand that held it, as if recognizing touch. Finally, in frustration, Mara did something that no simulation suggested. She spoke to it, not to a machine, to a thing made by mourners. "I don't know how to learn," she said, "but I want to." Nothing happened for a long time. Then the ring vibrated, barely. The array's dead lights flickered. A new channel opened, not to the comm network but to the bones of the station itself. The ring did not transmit words, it transmitted absence, a pocket of perfect stillness. And in that stillness, the engineers heard something they had forgotten existed, their own breathing. They had lived for so long in noise, alerts, feeds, propaganda, crisis, that silence felt like exposure. One engineer began to cry quietly, his tears floating inside his helmet. "I haven't," he said, voice breaking, "I haven't been quiet since the Belt Wars." Mara watched him and in that moment understood the Ariathe message. Grief is a language, learn it. Silence was not the lack of sound. Silence was the presence of attention. They tried again, not with scanners but with ritual. The engineers cleaned their work area. They removed unnecessary lights. They shut down chatter. They stopped arguing. They sat around the ring in their suits like monks around a relic, and they did nothing. For an hour, then two. In the third hour, the ring responded. The dead jumpgate array, long deprived of the exotic matter that made it function, produced a faint curvature in space. Not enough to open a gate, enough to suggest a direction, a vector, a path drawn not through distance but through meaning. The engineers stared at the readings. This shouldn't be possible, one said. Mara nodded. Maybe it is. Maybe we're not supposed to use it. Maybe we're supposed to follow it. The second silence was the decision they made next. They did not announce the discovery. They did not weaponize it. They did not sell it. They simply went. A small ship, no flags, no weapons, no livestream, followed the ring's vector into the black between mapped routes. It moved not by jump gate, but by incremental folds. The ring seemed to coax from reality, like a hand guiding a needle through fabric. Days passed. Then weeks, measured by hunger and sleep cycles rather than headlines. At last, they arrived at a place no human chart had marked, a region of space where starlight dimmed not because of dust but because the geometry itself was tired. In the center floated something vast, a lattice of interwoven arcs like an immense braided cord stretched across light years. The ship's instruments refused to describe it. Their minds tried anyway, a bridge, not between points, between histories. A signal flared from within the lattice. Not a greeting, a question. Why do you come? The engineer who had cried earlier looked at Mara. Answer, he mouthed. Mara put her gloved hand on the ring and chose her words like stepping stones. We came, she said, because we were taught to be quiet, and in that quiet we realized we don't know how to mourn what we break. There was a long pause. The ship drifted in a darkness that felt like waiting for a verdict. Then the lattice responded. A corridor opened, not of space but of permission, a way through, and the message came again, softer. Then learn with US. The second silence ended with a human choice that no empire had ever made before. They did not plant a flag. They did not demand trade. They did not claim discovery. They sent teachers, grief counselors, linguists, musicians, ritual keepers from 100 human cultures. People who knew how to sit with pain without trying to conquer it. They came not to extract but to offer. It was in its own way a radical technology. The third silence happened years later, and by then the galaxy had begun to notice. Because what the Ariathe showed humans, what humans then spread like a gentler infection, was not faster than light travel or weaponless supremacy. It was something stranger, a new diplomatic protocol that worked. At the braided lattice, the Ariathe hosted gatherings that were not negotiations. They called them vigil forums. When two species approached conflict, they were invited to the lattice. They were asked first to name what they had lost, not strategically, not publicly, truthfully, and then they were asked to be quiet together. At first, human delegates hated it. Silence felt like weakness, like giving the other side room to maneuver. But something happened in those shared quiet hours. The body stopped bracing. The mind stopped rehearsing victories. The stories people told themselves about enemies, about righteousness, grew thin. In the third year of the Vigil Forums, a species from the Saffron Nebula arrived, furious and radiant, their ships painted with ultraviolet threats. They had been mining a comet field humans considered protected. Skirmishes had left hundreds dead on both sides. The Saffron delegates brought a relic, a charred fragment of their first-generation ship destroyed decades earlier in an unrelated accident. To them it was sacred, a symbol of survival. To humans it looked like scrap. At the forum, the Ariathe asked them to place the fragment in the center of the chamber. Then, to everyone's shock, the Ariathe asked the humans to speak the names of the dead Saffron miners. Humans did not know the names. They had never asked. The Saffron delegates hissed in contempt. Of course you don't, their translator spat. Mara Vance, older now, hair gone silver, joints stiff, stood and did something that would have been political suicide in the old assembly. She said, teach us. Not as a maneuver. As surrender, so the Saffron taught. They spoke the names of their dead, each name a tone and a color. The humans repeated them, clumsy and aching. Then the humans spoke the names of their dead patrol crew. The Saffron repeated them, their throats shaping alien syllables around human grief. For a long time after, nobody spoke at all. The chamber held a silence so dense it felt like gravity. In that silence, something shifted, not agreement, not forgiveness, recognition. They all had dead. They all had children they buried in the void of history. When the silence ended, the Ariathe asked a final question. What do you want to build that does not require more dead? The Saffron proposed a shared stewardship of the comet field with joint rescue protocols and a memorial beacon that would broadcast names, not victories. Humans agreed. Then other species came. The choirminds of Ventes, who could only speak in harmonics, found common language with human musicians. The gravitic clans, whose bodies bent space, found that the Vigil forums reduced their instinct to crush threats before they formed. And humans, who had once thought diplomacy was a contest of leverage, became known for something else. They became known for bringing silence, not the silence of suppression, but the silence that allowed truth to appear without being immediately sold, spun, or weaponized. Other civilizations began to imitate it, some clumsily, some sincerely. Across the trade routes, you began to hear it said as a proverb, "If the humans ask for quiet, listen. Something important is about to happen." It changed the galaxy not because it ended all wars, nothing did, but because it made a new kind of peace possible, peace that acknowledged loss without demanding it be erased. And at the center of that shift was an act that no one could have predicted. Humans, given the chance to turn mourning into a strategic advantage, chose 3 times to do the opposite. First, they granted the corridor of silence. Second, they hid the ring and followed it with humility instead of greed. Third, they institutionalized quiet as a tool of diplomacy, exporting it like a technology no one had known could exist. Years after the first corridor, Mara returned alone to the wreck site where Harborlight had died. There was nothing left to see, no debris, no spiral, just the cold, indifferent stars. She held the ring, its surface worn smooth by her thumb over time, and closed her eyes. In the quiet, she whispered the name the mourners had spoken. Saren of Second Dawn. Her suit recorded the sound, but she did not transmit it. It wasn't for the galaxy. It was for the dead, and for the living who kept learning. The ring warmed in her hand, not as a miracle, as an answer. In the distance, far beyond human maps, where the braided lattice shimmered like a scar that had healed into art, a new corridor opened. Another species had arrived to mourn, and somewhere on some ship, a human delegate shut off the feeds, silenced the alarms, and said to a room full of potential enemies, "Let us be quiet first." Because that was what changed the galaxy forever, not the weapons humans built, not the gates they stole from physics, not even the alliances they forged under threat. But the moment they finally understood that grief was not a weakness, it was a language, and the first word of that language was silence.